is Nicole Whitney, News for the Soul, life-changing talk radio from the uplifting to the unexplained.
News for the Soul is now in its 25th year of broadcasting. Tune in live or visit the archives at newsforthesoul.com. That's newsforthesoul.com. Next on News for the Soul, Light Body Healing with Dr. Lara. Dr. Lara is a functional medicine health coach, an advanced practice clinical pharmacist specialist, master intuitive healer and channel, and international teacher and speaker on a mission to empower you to take an active role in your healing journey to achieve holistic health mastery of the mind, body, and spirit. Dr. Lara combines energy medicine with functional medicine to facilitate healing at the root level. Call in now to speak with Dr. Lara today. 646-595-4274. 646-595-4274. Please welcome Dr. Lara back to News for the Soul.
Hello and welcome everyone to the latest episode of Light Body Radio. I am your host, Dr. Lara May, and today I am super excited to have with me Edith Forbes. She is the author of Tracking a Shadow, My Lived Experiment with MS, a memoir about the self-designed experiment that led her to identify a unique approach to the disease. She has also written 4 novels published by Steel Press in Seattle. She began her career in computer programming, but abandoned it for less logical purposes, including farming, house renovation, and writing. In addition to novels and her memoir, she has penned essays, poetry, screenplays, and a cookbook. She holds a degree in English from Stanford and was raised on a ranch in Wyoming and currently lives on a small farm in Vermont. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
So let's just get started by telling us a little bit about your background. So in the book, you talk extensively about how you grew up on a dairy farm, and then also obviously how that you found out that you had MS. So just tell us about those things.
About the background? Well, I mean, I actually grew up I grew up on a ranch in Wyoming. It was actually beef. It was cattle, but it was beef cattle. We did have some dairy cows, but they were for our home use, and that may be why, since I talk about the cream separator in my book, you know, we did have a small dairy, but it wasn't what we did commercially. And then, you know, many things happened in life. The computer programming, the writing, various things. And I ended up living on a small farm in Vermont where I had a few beef cows. Well, I did have a dairy cow for a while. And then as far as what led to this book, which was a kind of a change of direction for me. I mean, it wasn't something I set out intending to write, but in 1993, I started having some weird neurological symptoms, and I went to my family doctor, who was someone I had a high regard for, and he was a very forthright fellow, and he said, well, there's 3 things this might be. It could be a brain tumor, it could be tertiary syphilis, of all things, or it could be multiple sclerosis, or it could be nothing at all. And 2 of those things got ruled out pretty quickly. The brain tumor, the symptoms went away, so we knew it wasn't that. And the tertiary syphilis, there were no other symptoms, and I was in a monogamous relationship and so on. So that's when I found out I might have MS, but I also might have nothing at all, because MS, in case people, it comes and goes early on. It kind of appears and disappears, and the symptoms can be wildly variable from one person to another. So at first I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, well, this is just probably some passing thing. And I was busy on the farm, and my first novel had just been published. So I was extremely excited about that, and really not thinking very much about, and I didn't know very much about MS. So I went and read a little bit just to know what he was talking about. And that's when I found out it's an autoimmune disease that attacks your nervous system. It basically chews away the insulation on your nerves and your central nervous system. And because it can damage your nerves anywhere in the system, it can cause all manner of different symptoms, from blindness to spasticity to, buzzing in the nerves to loss of balance and a lot of fatigue. And people end up, the famous cases. I mean, the case I knew about at that period of time was Jacqueline Dupre, who was, the famous cellist who got the disease and first couldn't play the cello and then died quite young. So I knew about the bad cases. And I also knew that there were cases that were very mild, that people would live with it their whole life and not have big problems. But I really wasn't thinking about it at that stage because I didn't really think it was what I had. And then about a year and a half later was when the symptoms came back. I got a lot more tests and that's when I kind of got serious about it and started trying to learn about the disease and what I might do, because there were no treatments. I mean, that was the other reason it really didn't matter to know whether I had MS at that stage, because there was nothing to do about it anyway. Even if you did have it, they had nothing to offer as far as trying to keep it from getting worse. So,
yeah. And I'll just interject here a little bit, and because in Western medicine, a lot of times the question is, well, will this change how we treat? And if it won't change how we treat, then it's oftentimes considered unnecessary or extemporaneous or, not necessarily that quote unquote relevant. And unfortunately, that's just the Western medicine approach. Instead of investigating the root or the cause or all these things, well, if it won't change how we treat, then why does it matter is sort of the approach to a lot of things that Western medicine treats or doesn't, depending on how you look at it.
Well, and also their definition of treatment tends to be something they can give you. I mean, like something they can give you, as opposed to, how you might change your lifestyle, what might be causing this that you could eliminate from your environment, any number of things that sort of aren't kind of in their wheelhouse, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, I call it a Band-Aid approach. It's not a real treatment. It's just usually a symptomatic or short-term, like let's just cover it up and see, hope it gets better or hope it doesn't get worse, really. So.
Well, it depends. It depends a lot on what condition you're talking about there, because
absolutely.
Okay, some diseases they have dynamite treatment for. I mean, if you get an infection, you want to get down there and get your antibiotic.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
so it depends but then other diseases. I mean, that's the thing. Multiple sclerosis is in the category of something where they're learning a lot more about it now, but at that time, they understood the sort of basic mechanism, but they really didn't know. They had no idea what caused it. They still have no idea what causes it. And they didn't really know how to interrupt the basic mechanism. So they didn't have good symptomatic treatments at that point, except they would give you steroids during the flare-up to try to cut down on inflammation. But as far as anything that would reduce the likelihood that you had a flare-up, they had nothing. And so that's when, I kind of went off on I was just like, I'm not going to sit here and sit still and wait and see whether this disease is going to, whether I'm going to be one of the people who has a bad case or one of the lucky people who doesn't have too bad a case. That's when I went off and did a tremendous amount of research at the medical library. I wasn't off in some, anywhere else particularly. I was but there was in fact a lot of information in certain arenas about the disease, like the epidemiology of it had been studied a lot because they were so mystified by it. It was so variable and so unpredictable. And so that kind of information there was a lot of.
Yeah, when you talk about your deep dive into the research, it's interesting to me that where you found the correlations. And internationally. So like when we say deep dive, you were doing international literature searches essentially to find out what was going on in other countries, where was this disease popping up there, and maybe what were some similarities that you could piece together, right?
Yeah, I mean, back in that era, in 1995, the internet wasn't nearly as sophisticated as it is now.
Right.
So I wasn't able to do the kind of searches I did later, but I was able to find a lot of stuff that was written about where the disease was common, what countries had a lot of it, what correlations there might be with climate or with, whatever else, because apparently it's rare in the tropics and common in temperate climates. So that was one thing they were on the hunt about. And what happened is I looked at the data and I thought, this looks an awful lot like the distribution of dairy cattle, because my background was in agriculture. So I was kind of like, this was what I knew about. And so then I did more. That's where I have a relative who was a cancer researcher at NIH, and he did at that point have more access to medical journal articles than I did. Now there's a lot more stuff available, but back then, a layperson, he could find a lot more stuff than I could. And that's when he found me an actual study that said, yes, there does appear to be correlation, at least at the population level, between milk and multiple sclerosis.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you decide to do? Once you kind of at least found this one piece of possibly milk being some sort of precipitating factor or correlation, where did you go from there, or how did you implement that into your life?
Oh, well, that was the kind of thing that's really easy for an individual person to do that is harder for a medical person to do, because they always they have to have study, all sorts of documentation and clinical trials to back them up before they can recommend something. And I was one person with no one to harm but myself. So I could just say, I'm just going to stop drinking any milk. I mean, if there's a chance that drinking milk increases your likelihood of getting MS, it may also increase the severity of MS if you do get it. And so I just completely stopped consuming any milk products whatsoever, including, I was even really careful. Well, because I didn't, because it hadn't been studied. The medical community was not talking about this at all. There was this one study that someone had done, but in the larger literature, this was not even being, it wasn't
right.
It certainly wasn't something a patient could do. So I stopped doing any milk, including, I would read labels and try to avoid, I didn't eat it, any baked goods or anything that even had milk in it. I was avoiding even that, because since I didn't know if there was some factor in milk, I didn't know what it was. So I was I'm just going to completely eliminate all of it and see, if it helps. And I did start taking some calcium, because I was a little bit worried that cutting milk out of my diet it's a big source of calcium in a lot of people's diets. And I wanted to be sure I was, not giving myself a deficiency in a different area. So I didn't take a lot of calcium, but I just took, kind of a part dose or whatever, whatever the recommended daily. I took a third of it or a half of it or something. But that was the only other thing I really did in conjunction with the milk, was just trying to make sure I didn't miss out on some nutrients from it.
Yeah. And just for reference out there, now, especially in the functional medicine world, we have the Walls protocol, which Terry Walls, physician, has healed herself from MS also, as much as you can be, but functioning, reverse the progress of it. But she didn't really publish any of that until 2007. So from your perspective, you were, on this path, on this research voyage, and trying to just figure out what you could do that would benefit you to the maximum and prevent this progression, pretty much 10 years or more before that even, was available to, and even in 2007, I would say it wasn't available to the mass public, her book is now, but, and probably I think it's pretty well known. But yeah, so that must have been super challenging for you. Did you feel like you were supported during that journey, or?
Well, it depends who you're talking about. I mean, my friends and family all were very supportive and very helpful. And I kind of have a scientific curiosity. I mean, so for me, I sort of felt like I was making an experiment. Like here, I almost felt like I was specifically trying to do an experiment. I mean, I didn't have a big study group to do it on, but I had one person to do it on. So I was interested in what was going to happen, and that was curious. So that helped me as far as because I love Mill. I mean, I love everything ever made from Mill. So it wasn't like I wanted to give this stuff up. I just, like cheese, melted cheddar cheese on crackers, like that's to die for. So I needed some things to kind of bolster me to say, let's, just stick with it. And partly I have to say, I was really scared about the MS. I mean, because when it's bad, it's really bad.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So when it's, if you're one of the people, a lot of people really don't have very severe problems from it. But when you do get the severe problems, it's really bad. So I was a very active, I run and I ski and, I was very active. So the thought of losing that was really big for me. So I was motivated. And the other good thing that happened is that in addition to just the, my fear of MS, after I went off milk, a couple of other things in my health changed positively. One of which was my cholesterol dropped quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would have been normal, and then it was like really low, which for most Americans would be a good thing. And also I had respiratory allergies. I had horrible hay fever working on the farm sometimes, and that got better after I went off milk.
Yeah.
So that really helped keep me going on it. That even if it wasn't doing anything for the MS, it was sort of doing good things for me otherwise. And that early on when I didn't know what to do about the MS, that was very helpful.
Yeah, and I would actually argue that it probably did help you because, anytime we can eliminate a level of underlying inflammation, it's going to help our body and whatever else it's struggling to sort of re-equilibrate and bring back to homeostasis, right? Because ideally our body wants to be in a state of homeostasis. It wants to be in balance. That's its natural state. And we are really fantastic as human beings at throwing our body out of whack. Well, most of us definitely don't mean to. And then it's like this journey of like figuring out how to come back. And I eliminated dairy in my own life when I was going through my own self-discovery of how to heal my IBS. And I also had all these other symptoms that I didn't think were related. But then once I got rid of the dairy and the gluten and some of these other things, but the dairy was really the big one. My allergies also went away. My migraines decreased in severity and frequency. I had chronic acne. My skin cleared up. I mean, just so many things. Many things that I never even realized were connected to the dairy. Because it's just one of those things that as a small child, you're raised on cow's milk. We're, taught from big food and commercial industry that cow's milk is so good for you and all of these things. So how fast did you notice a change in your symptoms from when you really, really decided to like cut it out and just leave it behind?
Are you talking about the MS or the other things?
All of it.
With the allergies, it was sort of they sort of gradually got better and better, so I noticed some change immediately, and then over time they got better and better. And, partly, some of that could be age because some allergies get less as you get older, but it was more than just could be explained by age. I didn't age that fast. And as far as the MS, the thing was I was still in the relapsing remitting phase of MS. I'd only had two episodes in 93 and late 1993 and early 1995. Then I went off milk. And the only symptom I had that was left after that second episode was just a little tiny bit of numbness in like part of my left hand. So I really had essentially no symptoms. So there wasn't any, that was one of the reasons it was a little hard to know whether the milk was doing anything, is because I didn't have any symptoms to go away. It was a question of whether it kept symptoms, me from having another relapse where the symptoms come, which is what the doctors would have said was going to happen. Later when I got my confirmed diagnosis, I said, well, back when there weren't any medications, what would you have told me about the disease? And they said, well, I've told you it'll get worse. Great.
Right. Like, it's just a part of the progression. Like, this is how it's going to be.
That's how the disease works. Not, and it varies. It's just hugely variable from one person to another. So the doctors really can't tell you like how fast or in what way, but they'll say it's highly likely that it's going to get worse in some fashion if you do nothing. So there wasn't anything to note. That's one of the reasons why I needed these other incentives. If I had a bunch of symptoms that suddenly went away when I went off milk, then it would have been like clear cut that I should stay on it. But that wasn't the case. It was the case that I was just waiting to, the thing that became the benchmark is it was a year and a half between those two flare-ups that I had. And I didn't have another flare-up until 2004. So it went from being a year and a half between the flare-ups to being 9 years. And also that flare-up in 2004 coincided with almost the only times when I ate something that might have had milk in it. In the case of sort of politeness and emotional context that I just wasn't ready to say, oh, does this have milk in it? I just ate what was put in front of me, and then like a few days later, the symptoms came back. So I have to say after that experience, I was like, I got really absolute about the milk. I just, I will eat nothing rather than eat something that has milk. If I have to just skip a meal, fine. And I haven't had a flare-up since 2004. So, now I'm pretty dedicated. Yeah. Now it's like, well,
Yeah. For me, I don't miss it at all. But I think also too, like when you're one of those people that you have a direct correlation, like when if you have it, then this happens. Then, and that's unpleasant, or it leads to something that can be catastrophic, then it makes it a lot easier to just be like, nah, I'm good. I don't need it anymore. My body is obviously not benefiting from it in any way. So I'm curious, have you tried like sheep or goat products? Because those animals don't have the same protein makeup as cows in the milk that they produce?
Until somebody does, see, my goal in life is I'm hoping somebody will do more research in this area. Real systematic research, because until I know for sure what it is in the milk that is the problem, if it is a problem, I'm just like I just don't touch any milk. From any animal. And it's partly also, mammal, we're mammals. And so the milk of another mammal, milk is just very biologically active substance. It's full of hormones. It's full of antibodies, immunoglobulins. It's full of all sorts of stuff that is specifically designed to interact with our, with the calf, but it's designed to be active and to, have lots of,
to help a baby grow,
that could be true of milk,
but not an adult.
Yeah, so it could be true of, I don't know. It's designed for their babies, not for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
So until if they find out what the issue is, if they ever could pin down and say, oh, we finally know why it is this is causing the problem, and they could say, and it's only true of cow's milk. Because one of the things, that when I decided to write this book, I went back and did a lot more research on what's going on now in conventional medicine, about what are they finding out about the disease. And I found a lot of really, I was really interested in what's going on now, that, there was sort of more support for the idea that something about the diet matters in MS. They were finding, that study from Japan that was showing that people just had a whole different profile of gut flora, depending on whether or not they had MS or not. It sort of suggests that, it might be to do with what you're eating. And, and then I got on the track of this virus that is in milk. I mean, that can be shed into milk by the animal that gave the milk, that has the potential to be a source of a protein cross reaction.
Right.
Which I guess we're getting into the weeds.
Oh, good. We're not afraid of weeds here.
That's the current theory about MS is that, one of the theories is that it's a cross reaction between your immune system and some protein in something in in the environment. And so, and viruses have always been at the top of the list of things they were looking at as potential sources of this cross reacting protein. So,
Right. Well, especially because some virus families, there's so many different varieties of them and strains that it's hard to pin down when we're so prolifically exposed to some of them and in such a, ubiquitous isn't the right word, but especially depending on where we grow up, like you said, if the environment that we grow up in, what we're exposed to, whether it's, plants, animals, maybe like outside chemical factors too, and then how that interacts with our own system. Have you noticed any correlation between like levels of stress for yourself as, talking about like N as a power of 1?
Yeah, that is so interesting because, that was one of the things, even in the literature I was reading back in 1995, there was some speculation that stress might be a factor in flare-ups with MS. And I have to say, I write about this in the book, that for me personally, it appears stress does not cause relapses, because I've had various things in my life in recent years that were extremely stressful. And I didn't have a flare-up in response to them. The thing I do notice with the flare-up I had in 1995, it left slightly more pronounced numbness in my hands than I'd had before. But that's the only symptom I have, is just a little bit of numbness in my hands. And I've never had fatigue. And I do notice sometimes if I'm either really hot, in hot weather, or if I'm really stressed about something, I just notice the numbness more. Not that it's a flare-up. It's not that that the disease has activated and is causing a new problem. It's that the damage it left behind is more noticeable when I'm stressed, So, and that may be why people thought stress was related to flare-up. And for other people it may be. People's systems are different. And so it could be that there's a reason why they thought it was for some people maybe it is. But it isn't. Right. I was kind of like, phew, that's a relief, because it's bad enough to be stressed without then thinking, oh my God, this might trigger a relapse.
Right, and now you're double stressed.
I know. Yes.
So tell us about why your mother had such a profound impact on you through the process of you overcoming this disease process.
Well, my mother was a remarkable woman. I was born in 1954. My father already had lung cancer when I was born.
Oh, wow.
And he died in 1955, so I was a year old. And my mother, he left, so I have 6 siblings. So there were 7 of us, 7 kids, the youngest being me, who was a year old. And this cattle ranch that we were living on in Wyoming. And he also had this idea of trying to bring some new ideas to agriculture, to cattle production, and make it more efficient, if you like. Make animals make better use of feed, basically. Anyway, he had an idea that he was trying to use our ranch as a kind of an experiment to test, with our cattle. He was going to try this out and see if it would work. And then if it worked, he could try and tell other people about it. So I kind of grew up with this mother who took on raising the ranch, running the ranch, raising the family. And also later, once she kind of got things stabilized in those two arenas, she took on trying to like work on this idea that my father had. She was like dedicated to taking it out into the world and talking to people about it. So she was and it was not a popular idea in the beef industry at that point. That's a very conservative group of people, and they were, and she was a woman. But she was just, she was a very determined person, and that was kind of and she was willing to thing that was definitely off the beaten path, that was trying to, bring new ideas, try something new that might make things better. So all of that, when I was the last kid in the house, so I got even more of a dose of her than the rest of the family did. Some of them had kind of grown up and gone at some point, but yeah, so, it gave me a lot of belief that you can do that kind of thing, for one thing, and that you need to think for yourself, that you shouldn't just take what everybody thinks as being a given, that you need to think about it. It's not to say they're wrong, but you want to think about it carefully before you, just leap to assume that what, if the conventional wisdom is true. So that was, it's hard to convey. I mean, I write about her a lot in the book because she was just a fascinating person.
Yeah, I think that's a great message, and especially it's one that I love to bring to my audience, which I'm so happy that you're here today and that you wrote this book, is that regardless of what is happening in the dynamic of medicine, and I mean, you could even extrapolate this to other areas of life, really, but it's to me, it's like, question everything, like seek help and take advice, but also do your own research and just ask yourself, like, does this resonate with me? Like if a doctor gives you a certain, treatment plan, it's okay to say, oh, that doesn't really resonate with me. I'm going to get a second opinion, or I'm going to find a different practitioner, or maybe you say, yeah, let's do that. We'll work together as a team to approach whatever the problem is. And so I love that. And I love that it sounds like your mom was a pioneer in her own right.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And bringing that message forward that life isn't always, easy and hunky-dory, but that doesn't mean that we can't do hard things and still have a really fulfilled life while, navigating through some hard stuff in life. She was an inspiration in that way. I mean, for sure. And and she got interested in all sorts of, she got very interested in lots of alternative health thinking too, later in life. Once my brothers took over running took over the business, when she was older, she was kind of ready to be done with that. And she got very interested in certain alternative health practices and was encouraging people to try them. Yeah. Cool. So did you find any other food correlations throughout your research, or even, throughout experimenting with your own body through this process?
Well, no. I mean, I didn't experiment with other foods. The original decision about milk had been based very specifically on the actual epidemiological apparent potential correlation. And honestly, this was where having grown up in this sort of our ranch was like a petri dish itself. It's like I was living in an experiment my entire childhood. So the concept of doing an experiment came very naturally, and I was doing this experiment on myself about what happened with milk, and I didn't want to do a whole lot of other things, because then I wouldn't know which one had done I wouldn't know whether it was the milk or whether it was something else. If I did 5 different things, how would I know which one was the one that actually did, made a difference? And I hate to say that, in an odd way, was part of my motivation when I had the flare up in 2004. That's when I went back And they had the MRIs and said, yes, you definitely have MS. And here's the drug here are the 2 drugs that are available. And, you can take whichever one works better for you. And I was like, my flare-up interval was 9 years. And these drugs, they were going to reduce the flare-up. They were going to give you a little bit more time. I was thinking, I'm going to have to be on this drug for 10 years before I even know if it's helped me. And also, I just felt like if I start taking a drug, then my other experiment is out the window, because I don't know whether anything good that happens in the future, I don't know if it's because it was the drug or because it was what I was doing with my diet. And I'm like, I don't want to mess up my experiment. I never took any MS drugs. I've never taken any MS drugs. And part of that was just, I felt like I was doing well enough that the side effects weren't worth it, given how infrequently I was having flare-ups. But part of it was just, I want to find out. I'm really curious about this milk thing. And, and if I start doing something else along with it, then, it's like I've met up.
Yeah. I'll just, add, since I'm glad you said that too, that it wasn't worth risking the side effects of the drug relative to where you were, like, at your baseline, also that, like, going through a flare, like that equation just didn't add up for you. And I think that's also something, going back to sort of the topic of, like, the sovereignty and the questioning everything, is that I really encourage all the listeners of this show to really have those discussions with your practitioner, with your doctor, whoever it is out there that's encouraging you to take a medication or even a supplement. Ask, what are the risks, what are the benefits, what are the side effects, to figure out, again, like, what is the ratio between the benefit and the risk, because everything in life is always a risk versus benefit equation if we really get down to the nitty gritty. And so, yes, keep making those hard decisions and just being, real and truthful with yourself. And sort of, there's an element, I think, of bravery in there too, because I think a lot of us are sort of, especially when we're scared with a life-threatening diagnosis, and then there's this physician that's in a place of power, because we tend to put physicians up on a pedestal, and then we sort of give our power away when we do that. And I'm of the opinion that it should be more of an egalitarian relationship of, they're here to help us and to guide us, but they shouldn't necessarily, like, be given the power to make decisions for us, or to maybe guilt us or shame us into doing something that we're not in alignment with.
Well, and also just, it's really important to push your practice. I mean, my experience, I've been through other medical experiences that involved much more extended, not with me, but with people close to me, where I was in extended, interaction with the medical system. And it made me realize how much you can't just passively rely on them to take care of you, basically. You really have to ask questions. You really need to, you want to educate yourself as much as you can as a layperson to know what questions to ask, and just be taking into account your own priorities and what you know about how your own system works, and which, they don't know they know about the disease, and they know about what treatments are available and on all of that, and they know a lot more about that than I would, certainly.
Sure.
But then there's the other dimension, so I want it to be a back and forth of, like, I bring what I know about myself and what I've learned from other experience, and I want to have a conversation with them, and I want to probe them for everything they know. It's like I want to rely on them for knowledge, but sort of relying on them for knowledge is not the same as relying on them for a decision.
Right. Oh, that's such a good point. I love that you said that.
Encyclopedia. I want to read it. I want to pick your brain, but that doesn't mean I want you to, like, necessarily decide for me.
Yes. Oh, that's so powerful. Absolutely. So before we start wrapping up, is there anything else that you feel like we haven't touched on or brought up that you really want to bring forward?
I don't know. It's hard to know. People, so you can. Mostly, I want to. You can ask questions of what you want to know. I'm not sure. I didn't have a specific agenda. As far. My sort of the single biggest goal I have is I would like to see more research. Well, two things. I would like to see more research, and I would like to see this information get to people who who might like to try it, just because it won't hurt you. That's the thing. I mean, that was the other reason I was perfectly felt free to try this, is that it wasn't going to do me any harm to change my diet this way, as long as I was careful about it. And I was already eating a very balanced, diverse diet. I mean, I ate tons of vegetables, tons of meat, a reasonable amount of grain. I mean, I ate everything basically. And then the only thing I cut out was milk. It's the kind of thing that somebody could try if they sort of want to, and there's no incompatibility with doing a medication while you're doing, you can, if you're taking it and you want to keep taking it, you can keep taking it. It's not like you have to do what I did, have a pure experiment on yourself. You can do the belt and suspenders method of this might help, that might help, so I'll do both. So both of those things, reaching scientists to say, hey, would this be worth more study, and reaching other people dealing with this to say, if some of you might want to try it. And I have a book that they can read if they want to know my story, but they don't actually have to read the book to know, I can tell them in one sentence as far as like what the prescription was. They don't have to spend a penny for that.
That's I love that. I love that you said that it won't hurt you to just try it, and again, you're right. It won't interfere with any medications. And so I would encourage everyone out there, if you're struggling with MS or really any autoimmune or what we consider to be an inflammatory illness, which is almost all of them, is just see and start experimenting. Like maybe, like you did, eliminate one thing, see if you feel better. That's what I did too. I started with gluten because of my GI stuff, and that was just sort of, to me, the front of mind. And what I'd been reading, it seemed like the most logical thing to try first. And I felt better after 30 days of not doing that. And then I eliminated dairy, and I kept going with the gluten-free lifestyle. And then things just got better. But, there's eggs can be inflammatory to some systems. Soy can be inflammatory to some systems. So there's a lot of things out there that can be considered inflammatory that might be triggering to the system and to a variety of these autoimmune and inflammatory conditions. So I encourage all of you to just try it. Again, you don't have anything to lose. It's not going to hurt you to eliminate something like that, even for a little while. If you don't notice a difference, then you can go back to enjoying it. So, I mean, I guess technically, even if you do notice a difference, you could go back to enjoying it if that's your choice. But the idea is, I think, is to be open-minded, to keep asking questions like we've said before, and to have that open dialogue with your practitioners. And to, again, like you said, don't let them have power over you to make decisions for you, but, allow them to be there as a resource for information and options. And then you get to decide for yourself what fits best in your lifestyle, with your family, career, all the things. So, well, thank you so much for coming on today. This was really fascinating discussion. Your book is fantastic. Even though it seems like it might be a little scientific, it's really not at all. For everyone out there, it's a really great read. And it's on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on, and you can get it at a bookstore too, either one, Amazon or just at an ordinary, if you have a local bookstore, you can get it there. I mean, they might have to order it, but but they can get it. It's distributed through everywhere, anywhere you can get it. Yeah. Yes,
let's support our local bookstores for sure. I love our local bookstore here.
Okay, I'll do one plug here. I know you're not doing videos. So.
Yeah, for those of you that are listening, she just popped up and showed the book. But for those of you, so you can find it on Amazon. Again, it's called Tracking a Shadow.
Tracking a Shadow.
I
Yes.
was leaving out the article there, tracking a shadow.
Yeah.
And you're Edith Forbes. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been, I'm very interested, although now I have lots of questions I want to ask you, but I guess I'm too late.
Oh, no, we still have a little time if you want to ask more questions. Go for it.
Well, I wanted to know about the rest of two things, the rest of your diet, and also you referred to it helping some condition, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't recognize it. You referred to it by initials, and you said there was some.
Oh, IBS, inflammatory bowel syndrome.
Oh, okay, yes, of course.
Yeah, which is now they've reclassified. So when I was first diagnosed in the early 2000s, it was just considered a chronic inflammation problem, but now they've reclassified it as an autoimmune disorder, which I think is really fascinating because I never thought of myself as, I don't know. It's interesting to think about the concept of autoimmune to me. I don't know if it is to you or if you've thought about this. But,
no, I'm fascinated by it. Yeah,
to think about there's something in my system that's attacking my own immune system. Like there's something about my system that wants to, sort of go on high alert, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, IBS is what I've been healing from. And my story is that I was diagnosed very early on. I was 23 and I chose to ignore it. The doctor gave me the choice to take a pill, which at the time didn't really, I was not a pharmacist then. I was just working in a greenhouse and I was a pharmacy technician. So I was aware of the drug, but it didn't really have any fantastic research behind it or outcomes. So I was like, no. But then he also gave me a tool of aloe vera juice, and which at the time I really appreciate that he did have some sort of food and lifestyle approach to offer. And he also, very much encouraged me to get my stress under control because at that time I was a very stressful person. I didn't have a lot of coping mechanisms. I definitely wasn't meditating back then, so or doing much yoga. I think most of what I was doing was power yoga, to be fit and in shape. So yeah, so then for the rest of it, I like you. I just ate everything because I didn't understand a lot, even though I was a biology undergrad. That's what my undergrad degree is biology. We didn't really talk a lot about food correlations with the human body at all. And that's something that I wanted to sort of bring forward too, is that we don't really think about farmers as being scientists, like that first thing that in our heads. But I will agree with you that I think farmers are probably the original ecologists. Because they're in the environment every day with their plants and their animals, depending on what they're farming and raising and breeding. And they see it firsthand. And when there's an issue that comes up, they're the ones that come up with the solution. And they have to take into account all these variables. But like you said, only focus on one thing to figure out if that's the thing that's going to help or, fix the problem.
Yeah.
And so of course, absolutely. I love it. I'm from East Tennessee, so I grew up around a lot of farms and farmers. And so I really appreciate a lot of what, especially small and local farms, they do for the community. It's really powerful. And I think now more than ever, we're seeing a resurgence of these smaller farms to really help bring more good, healthy food to the community, both plant and animal.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I keep sometimes it feels like an uphill battle. That's a whole nother topic, It
is. Well, we sort of talk about the weeds, but
where our food comes from. You could do a whole another program with somebody about that.
Yes. But it is something that I also encourage my clients and all the listeners out there that if you have the opportunity to buy locally sourced food, whether it's plant or animal, definitely do it, because it's really important to know where your food comes from, to know that it's being raised in a healthy, humane way, and it adds back to your own health, your own microbiome, because your outside environment is a key part of what makes up your inside environment too. And that's something that as scientists we're learning more and more about. But I think ancestrally we've known that for a really long time.
Yeah. I think, and people that are maybe a little, some groups that are closer to the land or to wildlife or whatever, maybe kind of instinctively have more of a grasp of this. But cool. Again, Edith, thank you so much. It was so pleasant to have you, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Well, and thank you very much. Okay, everybody, go out and get Edith's book. It's, again, like I said, a really pleasant and enjoyable read, and it's on Amazon. It's called Tracking a Shadow. And if there's anything on my website that can offer you as a resource, it's drlaramay.com, and I have plenty of dairy-free and gluten-free options on there in terms of recipes, blogs, evidence, and research to support all of these approaches that we've talked about. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Hear all of our previously aired broadcasts of News for the Soul online at newsforthesoul.com. Now let's get back to the show.